I spoke here yesterday as well, but hopefully I'll see some new faces. Hello. So, thank you so much for joining today's seminar in the last one of the day. And our goal here will be to discuss the importance and the urgency of sustainable retail. And I know that sounds like a lot, right? What does that actually mean? And so we'll go through that in the session, and we'll focus on one of its most important elements, supply chain. And in this case, ethical supply chains. My name is Francisca Sassetti, and I'm a responsible sourcing consultant at SEDEX. My goal is to work with organizations of all sizes and industries to help them achieve sustainability goals. And my area of expertise is in the human rights, forced labor, more side of things. If you want to scan the QR code, you can get my contact details and we'll be in touch with you. On to what really matters. So, today we will start by learning a bit about SEDEX, the organization that is responsible for my presence here today. We'll talk about sustainability in business, what it means, how it has changed, and what are the driving forces behind it today. Afterwards, we'll do a deep dive into some of the challenges and opportunities for businesses, and we'll end with some of top tips of what you can do right now to start implementing sustainable business practices within your business. And at the end, will be plenty of time for questions, so I'll really encourage comments, questions, participation. That's what this is all about. So starting with SEDEX. I'm here today representing SEDEX. Some of you might know a lot about us. For some of you, might be something new. Some of you might have heard about it. I've seen in some stalls here that you have SEDEX on your wall, which is great. Thank you for the free promotion. But essentially, we supply data-driven insights through our comprehensive services and tools. And what we do is to engage with companies, suppliers of all sizes, and across multiple industries and around the world, and with our community, to improve your environment, social, and governance outcomes, factors, initiatives. As a membership organization, we support a variety of businesses to tackle challenges in their supply chain. We provide this with an online platform, tools, training. We have our own community to enable sharing and learning. And some of numbers you can see on the screen, we have over 66,000 members around the world in 45 industries. And to date, we have impacted 33 million workers across 170 countries. This is half of the UK population, which, if you ask me, it's pretty impressive. We also have a global staff, and we operate across 7 countries, and we have also a multiple language capability. Let me show you with my mic. Anyway, so the core of SEDEX is the SEDEX platform. The SEDEX platform is a bit like LinkedIn, where you can connect your suppliers with buyers, and this way is a way for you to connect with your customers, with your supply chain. And once you connect, you can really share that information about your supply chain, about products, about any audits, about risk, or any policies you might have. So it's just a way to save duplication of efforts and really make sure that in whatever you're doing, that you're able to have a one-stop shop for managing your supply chain and just connecting with your business partners and those who are most important to your business. But I'm not here doing a sales pitch, so these are just some of our members you can see on the screen, and feel free to come to talk to me or our team as well on the site if you want to learn more. But talking to a lot of people in this incredible event here over the yesterday and today, is that a lot of businesses here are small independent retailers, but they work with massive wholesalers and other independent retailers as well, big UK retailers. So within SEDEX, our communities to make sure we connect each other as well, small and big companies. Now, on to why this is important and what is sustainability in business. I want to first start by saying what is not sustainability in business. And because we must take some things with a grain of salt. So sustainability in business is not just having a percentage of your products made from recycled materials. It's not having special certifications. It's not just carbon offsetting and planting trees every time someone buys your product. And it's not making empty commitments on your website. True sustainability in business requires an holistic approach. It's a bit of a jargon, and you might have heard about it, but essentially, There cannot be sustainability if people and planet are not equally considered. We cannot, but also, as you can see on the wheel, there's also the economic side of things. We cannot expect businesses to embrace sustainability purely out of moral responsibility and kindness. Because having a business is also about feeding families, investing in people's educations, protecting generations of family-run businesses. But to do this and to be sustainable, we must respect employees' right to decent working conditions and to fair wages, which is only possible if there is an economic benefit to sustainability, which is what I want to talk to you today. So, actually going back a little bit. So what is sustainability in business? Is it a way of doing business that considers the impact and actions of your services, products, everything linked to manufacturing, distribution, on society and on the planet? There's something very important to this approach is centering the sustainability at everything that you do and your relationships with your suppliers, with your business partners, and with your customers. There's two ways of approaching sustainability. There's the inward sustainability, which is how you assess internally, how you impact your employees, supply chain workers, your local communities, and the environment around you, because yes, the environment is a stakeholder. The external sustainability is your sustainability impact or social environmental impact onto your products, of what you put out there. Your product life cycle, which is linked to circular economy options, and even then your supply chain. Not that this is the world's most important thing, but sustainability in business has changed a lot. Some of you might have been around when it was still about philanthropy, corporate volunteering, and donations to marginalized communities, but things have changed. It went from a nice to have to something that absolutely impacts businesses' performance, risk, reputation, and performance, and profitability. It then moved into a compliance kind of focus. Business laws, responsible business laws started coming out. And these laws mandate that businesses must report on sustainability, ESG, human rights. And so companies say, okay, now I need to become compliant. Then it moved into an optimization focus, where companies said, wait, we can go beyond compliance, because actually there's a benefit to assessing risk. There is a benefit to understanding how we might be contributing to human rights abuses abroad, or how we might be contributing to the environmental degradation. And finally, what we have today is what we call a holistic focus, where sustainability is starting to be adapted as part of business models. It's not just a nice to have or an addition or something that we also think about. It is part of our brands' identities. And so many brands here, they're so careful about the type of fibers they use in their products, marketing them as sustainable, wanting to have certifications. And so this is the change that we're seeing. What has pushed sustainability to be what it is today? And so what we have on the screen, just some headlines of some of these recent drivers. We have investors at the top, investors, shareholders, the money people who now want to invest in ESG or do sustainable investing. So investing in companies that consider those factors, social, environmental, and governance factors as well. We also have governments, international standards, and regional bodies, such as the EU. For example, the upcoming EU directive, which seems a bit scary, but we'll see in a bit why it's very positive, actually, for accountability and for transparency. We'll have businesses themselves who are also calling for these laws, because some businesses are already doing such great work, but we need to level the playing field. It can't just be some businesses doing a lot and others being a laggard. And then we also have customers, supply chain workers, trade unions, and we see how customers are more and more concerned and more engaged with brands that truly put sustainability at the core of what they do. And speaking of customers, some of the trends we're seeing in recent years is that there's been a big and steep rise of ethical consumerism, particularly in the UK. It's not on the screen, but something like in the last 10 years, just products, ethical products have grown from £51 million to £121 million. Just products with the ethical label. Now, those who might also be ethical products or eco products, we see that there's a potential for a £60 billion green growth in the UK economy by 2050. So we see a lot of businesses jumping on the bandwagon. But how do we do this in a way that you're not committing greenwashing? which means you might get sued, which you might face penalties, which means you might break your customers' trust. And another important stat also on the screen is that 87% of consumers want brands to take action on sustainability today. And not just consumers, but the people who work for your business, your employees, people like me, will go into the job market wanting to work with companies to put sustainability at the core of what they do. And I think there was a study this year that showed that the second most important factor for when choosing a job these days to work in a business is sustainability. How is a company treating people and planet? And this is to say that if you want to attract the best people, you need to be doing something in that sense. Now, on to a big part of what we do at SEDEX. If you want to have an ethical and responsible business, which we just already determined is quite important, you need to have an ethical supply chain. What does this mean? It means that your expectations, the ones you hold yourself against, and the ones you have for the people you work with around a zero tolerance for child labor or health and safety in factories, such as, for example, having adequate temperatures inside of a factory, not forcing people to work with 50-degree weather inside of a factory without appropriate ventilation. Those expectations, or anti-corruption policies, those expectations you cascade down into the supply chain. And so what you do is that we see that businesses start a lot on this layer, on the ethical operations. You start to have policies around ethical conduct policies for yourself, for your employees, and your offices. But then what we want companies to go a step further and go into the supply chain. So the people that you work with directly. So how does that look like? That means having, for example, a supplier code of conduct, engaging with your suppliers, the people you source from, ensuring that your suppliers have also policies, or they have healthy working conditions and safety. They provide training to workers around handling of hazardous chemicals or other machinery. But it also means conducting audits, site visits, and many other things. But then what we think businesses are struggling with still is the lower tier. The lower tier is your suppliers. And we know this might be a lot of layers down, but why this is so important is because as you go down in your supply chain is where the higher risks lie for human rights violations. Let's take the example of a baby clothing company. If any one of you has one, I'm not talking about you specifically, but let's say a baby clothing company. Let's say you source your t-shirts from, or the baby grows from a supplier in India. For a manufacturer, for example, in Portugal, where I'm from. The supplier in Portugal then buys the cotton, for example, the materials from India. But you don't have the visibility. And you don't know, maybe in India, you don't know if the working hours and the employment conditions are fair. You don't know if fair wages are paid. You don't know if the temperature for working is suitable. You don't know if they have a lot of damage that comes from coloring in the ink on the clothing. So I guess the point here is the lower you go, the higher the risks are. And for you to fully understand how you work as an ethical business, you need to dig deeper. Another drive that we mentioned briefly is around laws. And I'm not going to bore you with this, but they're coming, and some of them have already arrived. A lot of you might already know the UK Modern Slavery Act, which is for companies with a revenue of £36 billion or more. So for a lot of small retailers here, that won't be necessarily, that won't affect you directly. But if you work with a company or retailer that will demand that information from you or has to comply with those laws, then you will have to provide information of the due diligence you're doing. Think about it. If you work with a big customer, Costco, for example, you are their tier 1 supplier. And your suppliers, direct suppliers, are their tier 2. If you think about the onion diagram that we just saw. So there's a UK Modern Slavery Act. Then also this year we have the UK Plastics Packaging Tax, which says that companies must report on all plastic packaging coming to the UK to understand whether if they have less than 30% of recycled plastic, they will need to pay £200 per ton of plastic, over 10 tons of plastic per year, which will affect a lot of retailers as we expect. Then we have, for example, the UK Green Claims Code. Some of you might have seen it on the news as the greenwashing law, which means that if you make untruthful claims about your product being eco, sustainable, etc., you can get sued. You can have to pay huge liabilities as well. And you will break your customers' trust. And that's been on the news. I'm not going to mention names, but you might have seen it on the news as well. And then the EU Corporate Sustainability Directive. This will mean that across every country in the European Union, countries will have to transpose legislation to ensure due diligence on terms of environment and human rights for most businesses. And this will say that companies will have to report on what they're doing, not just a single report to say we've done X, Y, and Z, but to say we have done our work, we've done due diligence, we've dug deeper. Now, we talked about what SEDEX does. We talked a bit about what sustainability in business is, what is pushing it and driving it. Now, let's be realistic for a second, because it's all great. I'm sure we'll all like to have businesses that are 100% sustainable, if that's even possible. I'll tell you, I don't think it is. And talk about some of the challenges. These challenges come from conversations we had with our members. Do you remember the community of 66,000 members? From conversations we had here as well, from large to small suppliers. The first challenge that we see is the lack of supply chain visibility. And I already explained why this is so important. Because if you don't have visibility, you don't know what's coming for you. You don't know what risks you have. You don't know if the product that you put so much care into getting at the hands of your consumer, because maybe you're a family-run business, you don't know if you're sourcing a human rights abuse or environmental degradation. You don't know. You don't know how that might be affecting another community, another part of the world. So that's the first challenge. The second is supply chain disruption. And I guess in the aftermath of a pandemic, with the political crisis and all that disruption, we know what this can feel like as well. Another big challenge is the increase of cost of living, which is particularly important now in UK. Increase of cost of living, have inflation, an expected recession hitting the UK in the first quarter next year, which will affect businesses and a lot of the retailers here, particularly because these will result in reduced purchasing power. So what are you going to do without your consumers? How are you going to make sure you can still sell, you can still show your consumers that your product is worth it when they have less money to spend? Another challenge is the switch to online. We know that with the pandemic, a lot of retailers who had very physical locations and a way of operating that was based on that physical contact and direct contact with your customers, that has been lost. And some businesses have not adapted. Another challenge is also with the competing priorities. We know companies face so much pressure internally on budget, new products, development, innovation, new markets. How are you still going to allocate budget and effort for sustainability at the end of the day? It's just another burden. Another challenge is that some companies, let's say go back to the baby clothing company, you might source from countries, let's say in this case, India, where in some parts of the country, the labor laws are very weak and there's no regulated or very heavily regulated working conditions and, for example, and wage or salary. For example, or workers might pay high fees for recruitment. And this is because it's not regulated, because this is not inspected properly. This means that you might be working in a very high-risk region, which, without you knowing, it's affecting the way you do business as well. And you will, in a way, be sourcing that. You will be sourcing from that risk. Another challenge is the increasingly regulated environment. So we talked about the different laws. And you saw that map. There's laws popping up around the world. So how are businesses going to respond and be prepared? Another challenge is growing stakeholder expectations. And I guess it's just a fancy word to say your customers, your business partners, your suppliers, the retailers you aim to work with, already working with. We have recently a case of, I was working with a SEDEX member who wanted to get in shape in terms of sustainability. They didn't have many initiatives internally, but they said, our most important customer is this big retailer. And if we lose this client, if they tell us, if we lose this client, that's 90% of our revenue. What will we do? We are a family business. So how can small businesses keep up to make sure they can continue to be important suppliers for the big retailers? And finally, the greenwashing or social washing, which is around the social issues claims. So making sure you're not making untruthful claims about your products. Again, some headlines that you might have seen recently, and what they essentially represent is what happens when you don't do due diligence, what happens when, as a result of some of these challenges. So businesses rushing to make claims about their products that are not truthful, having to pull entire collections of their clothes so they don't get sued. Companies being sued by their own workers to seeking compensation for around health and safety, for example. Countries or governments facing legal action as well. And products being seized at the border because some laws require that if companies come from a high-risk region for human rights abuses, for example, they need to have documentation to prove that they are not, that there's been due diligence, audits, whatever it is. And in these cases, there's millions of pounds worth of product that have been seized just this year. But it's not all bad, and I guess we're here to talk about why embedding sustainability in your business can be a huge opportunity. So these are just some opportunities, and then what I want to do after this is just go through some top tips, right? So not to bore you too much. In terms of opportunities, the first one will be mapping your supply chain in your high-risk areas. We talked about why supply chain visibility is so important, but by investing in sustainability, you make sure that you are aware who your suppliers are, where they source from, what the conditions are, what the environmental impacts are, and then you can have a bigger picture of your own business as well. Another opportunity for sustainability is around creating resilience. So preparing for crises before they hit you. Let's say that you operate in very volatile and high-risk regions, or your suppliers are from regions that are currently affected by political crisis, uncertainty. Making sure that you have supplier diversity, policies or programs in place is a way to make sure that you're preparing for some of these things. You already know that is a high-risk region. I'm not saying that we should discourage businesses from engaging in those regions, because there's also a responsibility that if you are engaging and sourcing from a high-risk region, you want to help people as well. You want to contribute to the development of those communities. But still, there's opportunities for you to be prepared before something else becomes your next crisis. Another one, and we've heard this for a long time, I guess, in terms of, particularly from the consumer perspective, it's the quality versus quantity dilemma. And I guess I understand it might be challenging for a lot of retailers to invest in quality, but the truth is this is also a pathway for sustainability. Another huge opportunity from sustainability, and I'm not going to go through all of them, is also whilst the new normal and the online digital retailing, shopping experiences can be quite overwhelming for some businesses, quite very new, there's so many opportunities as well. When you craft your digital space with your own branding and what you want to transmit, you can also create a very unique space. You cut down on other costs. Also, you can improve the customer experience in other ways. And it can also be a way to be closer to your consumers as well. And to be more transparent, you can have more information about your sustainability practices, where you're sourcing from. And these are kind of things that I think the consumer today wants to see as well. For example, the first thing I see, and I know I'm a millennial, but the first thing I do when I go to a company website and I see a targeted ad on my Instagram is, okay, let me go to the sustainability section and see what they're doing. And I like reading this, and I guess, and I've spoken to other people to whom this is the same. So using this as an opportunity to have that kind of closer interaction, being more transparent and truthful as a business. Another really important one around the laws is the going beyond compliance. It's not just enough for businesses to say, yes, we want to be more sustainable, we're working towards that, but what are you really doing? Let's just set some clear goals for you and show due diligence, show progress. And when you invest in sustainability, you can really go just beyond the minimum standards. And the last opportunity when you invest in sustainability is that you don't have to worry about saying things that are not truthful or not transparent. If you make claims without knowing effectively that your products are certified, by a certain standard, and that means that they meet certain conditions, you can make those claims. If you don't even, for example, if you source from a supplier that tells you, yes, our products are organic, but you've not seen a certification, and we're having this conversation yesterday here as well, how can you make that claim yourself? How can you feel confident to make that claim, knowing that they might not be truthful, knowing that you will be the one responsible, and the reputation of your business is the one who will be tarnished if consumers find out, or a news outlet. So we talked about the opportunities for investing in sustainable business. So now, how do we do it, right? Because it all sounds great, but what is an actual way, a way for businesses to go forward? So at SEDEX, we have an approach to responsible sourcing based on 7 steps. They might seem like a lot, but actually they're pretty straightforward. Our team can provide you with a copy of these slides afterwards, and you can ask them all the questions you like. But essentially, we designed something that businesses at every stage of responsible sourcing journey or sustainability can use to see where they are and what they need to do. Let's use an example of, let's say, a small retailer, and they are preparing, let's say that they want to start with the first phase, awareness and preparation. This means having started with understanding what they're currently doing. Sometimes what we found with small organizations and retailers is that they already do some good sustainability practices, but it's a bit like patchwork, right? It's not all brought together, it's not formalized, it's not a formal process or procedure. It's all very informal. And we understand that when you run a small business, that happens all the time. My parents are farmers and have small businesses, so I know what that's like. And the time, and sometimes we're stretched thin. But formalizing this, understanding where we are and where we need to go is just so important, because it allows us to create a vision for who we want to be, what you want the business to become, and essentially, what you need to do to prepare. Let's say then that small retailer goes to step 2, which is define and commit. So what will we do in this stage? We would commit to some goals. Let's say by 2025, let's not go 2050, that's very far away. 2025, we want to have, let's say, 50% or 70% of all our products to be from organic products, organic certified. So what are going to be the steps? So maybe for this year, we will explore what are some of the organic certifications. Next year, we'll start with some applications. For some of those applications, let's say like the GRS, the Global Recycled Standard, for example, we need to have certain things in place like an environmental management system or an environment policy. We need to measure our use of water. So in those cases, you start preparing to say, okay, as we are applying, these are the things we'll need to put in place next year. So this is how we're going to work. You start to commit to things you want to do. The third step would be governance. So who's going to take ownership in the organization to move this forward? Who's going to be the big ally who will make sure we move all forward together? The fourth step is assessing risk and impacts. And these last steps are aligned with the UN guiding principles and other standards. The reason at SEDEX we don't start with assessing risks and implementing is because before you start doing whatever it is, you need to understand where you want to go first. So preparing, having awareness, committing to something, who's going to drive it forward, essentially. And then some of these monitor and evaluate is around measuring the effectiveness of what you're doing. And the final one is reporting, communicating your efforts. Because as much as it is great to do sustainability and invest, it's also so important to communicate it. But communicate in a truthful, transparent, and sizable or adequate manner to avoid falling into greenwashing. Before we open for questions, I want to leave you with some top tips. And obviously, each business is different and unique, but we would like to invite you to come talk to our team about whatever issues, challenges you're having, because we'll know that a lot of companies will be facing the same issues, and that's why SEDEX exists. So the first tip is going to be understand where you are in your sustainability journey. Sounds a bit general, but think about it. Where are you right now? What can you invest in at the moment? Are you in a place where you can get a sustainability manager, a shiny new person coming in, sorted? Or are you in a place where let's map some of the things we're already doing internally and see and learn from other peers? Sometimes one thing I always do when I start working, especially with independent or small retailers, is I ask them, so what are your goals? And they're like, we don't know. And I said, well, and they said, can you help us set up some goals? Of course. And ask, what are your peers doing? Oh, some of them have the certification, or some of them already have this percentage of products organic, or some of them have living wage. It's like, okay, so those are some great ways to start. Start looking around to your peers. I know we say not to compare yourself to others, but in this case, looking around is a great source of inspiration. Seeing what the peers are doing, what are the companies that you consider leaders, or some really, really great examples of who you want to become in the future, that's just a great way to start. If you are a bigger company, this also means starting to understand your obligations under a lot of the responsible business laws. And we know this can be a bit overwhelming, but there's just so many ways to start, lots of information online, and you can always obviously get in touch with us. But again, this is not a sales pitch. The second thing we would say as a top tip is start with the top. Before you tell your suppliers, you need to be ethical, recycled, sustainable, etc. Are you holding yourself against those standards? Do you have a strategy, maybe a statement or some lines or a mission? Do you have a policy, a responsible sourcing policy, or an environmental policy or human rights policy, where you say, we don't tolerate corruption, discrimination in our workplace the same way we can expect that from our suppliers? Or do you just expect that from others? So a bit like, do what you preach. And make sure those expectations then cascade from the top to the bottom. The third thing is building visibility, as discussed widely. This is so important, too, so you can anticipate risks and issues and know what's going on. And the way to do this is, we always say, start with your direct suppliers, those that you source and buy from directly in terms of your product. But then think about also your other suppliers, what we call the indirect suppliers. Those are the people who are responsible for the transport, the logistics, food, cleaning of your facilities or your products. Those indirect suppliers also contribute to your sustainability plan. It's not just what goes into making a t-shirt or a bag. It's also about how the bag was transported, what kind of packaging comes around the bag. Also very important. The fourth thing is around identifying issues and risks. So once you understand risks and have a way, for example, do you have a questionnaire for assessing your suppliers? So when you start having a discussion to say, this would be a great supplier for us, actually. They'll be able to help us getting that product that we need, or this will be a great customer for us. Do you have a way to do like a pre-screening or an approval? Like a questionnaire you send them, for example. At SEDEX we have one, but some sort of due diligence that you do before entering a business relationship to make sure they are legit, right? Usually we do this from the financial point of view standpoint, but do you do this from the sustainability standpoint? The fifth one is enhancing the worker voice. And I'm not just talking about trade unions. I'm talking about if people in your organization or they work with your business partners or in your supply chain, do they have a way to submit questions, concerns, raise issues? Let's say that the working hours in a factory that you source from in India, let's say the working hours are excessive and they go over the legal limit in India. Do you have a way for this particular issue to get to you? So having a whistleblowing mechanism or grievance mechanism is a very important thing, because obviously the experiences of those who make what we sell are very important to ensure we have true sustainability as well. And the last top tip I have for businesses is measuring your progress. And it sounds a bit corporate or businessy, but if you can't manage what you don't measure, essentially, how can you know where you are and where you're going if you don't have some goals, some indicators to say, okay, this year we want to make sure 20% of our products will have the certification or be organic. Or we want to make sure we reduced single plastic use by 50%. But where are we now? You can't eliminate something without knowing where you are. You can't reduce without knowing where you are right now. So measuring your progress is important. And this is something you can use to communicate. You can use in your product promotion, in your marketing, when talking to customers and potential, and also your suppliers. The last thing I want to leave you with is just some free resources we have at sedex.com. And these resources are for any business of any size. They talk about things like the upcoming laws, like the EU Corporate Sustainability Directive, the plastics packaging tax, supply chain disruption, and many much other content. And this is all free on our website. Before we get into questions and open the floor, I want to just remind you that we are here in Hall 19. Our team is at the stand 19E56. They're also right here. Oh, sorry, I'm pointing at you. I don't know if that's rude. And if you have any questions, please come to us. Ask any questions. Let's start a dialogue, conversation. This is how it all starts. And remember that your problem is not unique. We work with a lot of businesses. So thank you for listening until now. Let's open the floor for questions. Yeah. If you have a question, just put your hand up. We have a mic going around. Questions, comments, reactions. Let us know.
Hi, my name's Stephen. I run a retail consultancy, mainly looking at brand and customer experience. And now we start with what is your purpose? We're not experts in sustainability, but we want to understand how their purpose actually resonates with consumers and all the issues that you've talked about. But of course, one of the issues is the cost of living increase. We can't get away from that, as well as all of the costs that are rising for manufacturers and suppliers. How do we ensure, what levers or arguments can we use to ensure that the fact that it's seen as more expensive to be green doesn't prevent what needs to happen in terms of a sustainable future?
That is such a great question. This is why sustainability can be a bit like, maybe not right now. We have so many other costs. So how do we make it, in a way, make a business case for it, right? So I guess it's around some of the things we said, which is there's a benefit to it. One of the things, for example, is given how much consumers care about ethical things, ethical green products, whatever it is, that is a huge business advantage. That will be an important thing in terms of your marketing of your products, right? So you'll know that will lead to profitability. So that's one way to look at it, right? So investing in sustainability, even if it's an added cost, is something that a medium term, or even companies, we've seen in the short term companies who become, for example, GRS certified, and suddenly the product is worth so much. There's all kinds of studies done, market studies showing that this is what I now go when I buy a pair of jeans. I'll go for what's recycled. I go for what's the most sustainable because it's something that matters to people. So that is a big advantage, business advantage. The second is around the being prepared for what's coming. So working with customers. So the pressure doesn't just come from your consumers directly, those who will consume your final products, but also the people you'll be working with, like your distributors, the big retailers. They're looking for suppliers and smaller businesses, even if it's a bit unfair, they're where you do X, Y, and Z. They have this incredible certification, they are audited, they care about sustainability in some way, they have a nice story to it as well. And if they have to choose between your business, a business that does a lot on sustainability, another one that does very little, they'll probably choose the other supplier. And I guess even if it's a bit unfair, because we know the cost of living is increasing and there's many economic factors here, this is a huge business opportunity for you as well. Maybe investing, as we've done previously, that example I mentioned. Actually, I have another one around recently I worked with a dessert company that sells to big supermarkets. And 90% of the revenue comes from companies the size of Waitrose, Tesco, right? If they lose their business, and we're talking about millions in revenue, if they lose that big customer, they will close doors. If they have to invest £5,000 in sustainability initiatives in the company to make some things a bit greener or more, isn't that worth the customer that they're gaining or keeping, or the relationship they are growing? So this is just the businessy way of looking at things. There's the other things around the people you're attracting for your business, right? So yes, it costs us more money to be more sustainable, to have maybe more attractive policies, because sustainability is about our people. Do you have attractive policies, full-time permanent positions, maternity, paternity leave? Those sort of internal things as well to keep people. Are you a good employer? Those things which are included in sustainability, the inward part of things, the way you treat your own people, will mean you attract some of the most passionate people to work with you, right? Because and those future generations and the upcoming generations coming to the job market now really, really value that. So these are just some ways into why the investment is worth it, even during a time of crisis, right? Particularly now, how are you going to differentiate yourself from other brands, right? When a lot of businesses might be struggling a bit more, right? But we also know that it's all about taking small steps. We can't just expect a small company to suddenly spend thousands and thousands on a whole new shiny collection. It's not how it works, but there's some things you can do right now, something what we call the quick wins, right? There's some ways maybe in your business you can optimize. You can turn it to something a bit more sustainable. It's all about, even in your personal life, wherever you are in your personal sustainability journey as a consumer yourself, do you make small replacements? Do you take your own bags to the supermarket? You know, those kinds of things. So think about in terms of the business, what are those quick wins as well? A great question, thank you. Any other questions? Comments, reactions? Yes. Great.
Sorry, this might be a silly question because I missed the beginning of the chat, so I've never heard
No
of
silly
SEDEX
question.
before.
Amazing. So you give me a chance to do to explain again.
Okay, great.
So of course, so SEDEX is a membership organization. We are a not-for-profit or profit-for-purpose. Everything we do goes into making sure SEDEX is better for everyone. So SEDEX, what we do is we assess working conditions and environmental performance around global supply chains. We have over 66,000 members from huge, large retailers and brands like Costco and Waitrose and others. I don't know if I can mention them, but they were on the slide. To small suppliers, farmers around the world. And today we have impacted about 33 million workers and 33 million lives. Let me go back. I always wanted to go back in a presentation. I think it's cool. Okay, some of the brands that we work with, and obviously we put the big names because we want to seem important. But the truth is that a lot of SEDEX members are the little guys, are the smaller suppliers as well. We have we have regional offices around the world. Something very key to SEDEX is our platform. We have a bit like a LinkedIn. That's what I explained. We link suppliers and buyers into the same platform, so you can just share your information. And this is a way you have to see that you get oversight. You know what they are doing in terms of sustainability, and also you can share audits that you might have onto sites and facilities. You can share like around policies. And something important about SEDEX is we also have a community. We share resources online, our communities where we share experiences and learning. You also have the consulting team, which is where I work, where we provide bespoke support beyond the platform. And the great thing about SEDEX is that it's member-driven. So and maybe one of our colleagues could mention a little bit. What question we had yesterday, which I think is so important, is what is SEDEX doing to make sure it's suitable for small businesses, right? Those that have less financial capability. Maybe one of our colleagues could, I think, just to open more the floor, I feel like it's just me here and, yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name's Ellie. I'm part of the business development team at SEDEX. Do you want to just repeat the question for me, Francisco?
Yeah, so what is SEDEX doing for what are the benefits of SEDEX for small suppliers? How do we make sure that what we do is relevant for the small businesses as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of SEDEX as a membership organisation, one of the things we do is we have tiered membership. So your sales turnover is dependent on the price you pay for that membership. So those small suppliers are paying, a tiny amount to understand their supply chain and really establish where they sit within it as well, which is really important, especially from a big company to a small company. That cost is kept low. We're the most affordable in the industry. As a result, that means that we have complete clarity at a cost that's effective for everybody involved. So, being the most affordable, that means that we can keep our mission statement the same, which is basically just to help everyone from, the small farmers out there and those people within, for example, Tesco's supply chain, who are one of our founding members. So it's all about making that affordable for everybody and making sure everyone's voice is heard across the supply chain, whether that's human or, sustainability, it is completely accessible and the platform is accessible for everyone. And our team really helps support that. So for example, we have a member services desk which has multiple languages, so we can cover multiple nationalities and ensure that everyone has exactly what they need from SEDEX as a membership-driven organisation. I hope that sort of answers your question. Yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
This is why you must have your team here, because they are amazing.
If you guys have any questions as well, we're just over there. So there's a few of us who would be happy to help anyone with any further questions you think of after.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, reactions, thoughts? Yeah, that's a question over there. I'm going to move this forward a little bit. Okay. Hello.
Hi. So you have an office in India also, Gurugram?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have Indian members also in that?
Yes, we have a lot of Indian members as well. And something to keep in mind is that because we are very member-driven and particularly suppliers in the name of SEDEX, we understand that in Asia particularly is where most of the supply and our supply chains are, and most of our supplier members are in India and China, and that's why we have an office there. But also we're starting to see a trend there where we also work with big buyer organizations in India as well. So India is no longer just this end of the supply chain. It's becoming also where the big companies, where Indian companies in a way take the ownership of products and start to be the ones bringing the product over to Europe or to the US American market, for example. So yeah.
So can we compare SEDEX to Alibaba? I mean,
To a rival, yes.
Alibaba,
Alibaba.
the model is similar to Alibaba or no?
No, it's not very. No, it's not similar to Alibaba. So what SEDEX does is, although we are in a way, we have technology. We are not a tech company. We don't sell technology. What we do is we have a membership where people can access the platform, the SEDEX platform. But we're not selling up a specific product that your company buys and then it has it, or you can customize it. It's not how it works. And the other thing is, the only thing we specialize in is sustainability. That's all we do. And we assess, and the point of SEDEX is really to share supply chain data, so it's just focused on supply chain. I know that Alibaba has a variety of different products and information systems, but SEDEX is really just about connecting people. And then, like I said, the point also is to standardize. It's not to sell a product that your company, let's say, a product and then I buy a software and then I can customize it, or I can buy a product just for my company. SEDEX, the point is to standardize or to have clear standards on environment and human rights and corruption, for example, across all countries and around the world. The idea is to have fair standards for everyone, particularly often linked to address some of the local labor laws gaps. So the idea is that in countries where you can have very high health and safety standards, and others maybe the idea is they are perceived as being not so, a bit lower. But the idea is that SEDEX establishes a standard that we feel is acceptable, and these standards, the SMETA standards, the SMETA methodology, which is our audit methodology, has been developed by big companies and small suppliers as well. And what we make sure is that we have a standard for everyone. Given understanding that different industries have particular challenges and no one size fits all. But it's not the same as just selling technology to different providers. It's not like Microsoft on anything, or Alibaba, if that makes sense. Also, all our profits, we are profit for purpose or NGO. So everything that comes from membership fees or whatever we make goes into SEDEX, making SEDEX better and more affordable for everyone. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers. This question makes it look great, by the way. Thank you. Sorry. Any other questions, comments, anything before we finish the session? Thank you for the resilient ones who stayed until the end. I appreciate it. Okay.